Welcome to the channel for the future caretakers of resurrected species. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keepers Association.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keeper Association. My name is Austin. Now, when you think of extinct animals, not only we think of the bizarre, but we also think of the large dinosaurs, the large mammoths. But small animals are also pretty more commonplace in the fossil record than the big ones. But they are not by any means less fascinating. This animal, for example, is Drepanosaurus from the Late Triassic period. And let me tell you, this animal, despite its small stature, is no less strange or fascinating.
Drepanosaurus, or sickle reptile, an arboreal tree-dwelling insectivorous reptile that lived during the Late Triassic period. Its fossils were found in northern Italy and southwestern USA. These locations were relatively closer together when all the continents were together as the supercontinent called Pangaea. The type of habitats these reptiles inhabited were tropical or subtropical thick coniferous forests that were coastal and alongside streams. The seasons that this reptile and its habitat experienced were in severely dry seasons, followed by in severely wet seasons.
This means that the regions that the Drepanosaurus live in experience what scientists know as a mega monsoon. It's similar to the monsoons that are experienced in other parts of the modern world, such as India, but much more extreme, primarily because that with one large continent, the world at the time also had one large ocean, which was with the large ocean and all of its currents, it will make a large, insane weather patterns different to that of today. Drepanosaurus belongs to a group of extinct reptiles known as Drepanosauridae. This group of bizarre reptiles includes a lot of arboreal species, along with aquatic species and other varieties. And despite their lizard-like appearance, scientists believe that they are actually more closer related to the Artbyjrc family, which includes crocodiles, birds, and, of course, dinosaurs, more so than lizards. And the weirdest member of this reptilian family is, in fact, the family's namesake, the Drepanosaurus itself. Now, Drepanosaurus definitely is a very interesting, even bizarre reptile. Being at a length of 50 centimeters or 18 to 20 inches long, it's basically over a foot long and pretty close to 2 feet in length. So, it's a pretty decent sized reptile. Along with that, it also has a prehensile tail, very similar to that of New World monkeys, like the spider monkey, but they're also known to have a type of claw on the end of their tail, basically made with a fused vertebra. They have like a chameleon-like hind limbs, and perhaps the strangest one that's part of its namesake is its claws right here. Oh, wait, sorry. See? It actually has a large claw on its forelimbs, which give it the name Drepanosaurus, or sickle reptile. It is believed that they would use these claws to scratch on the bark of trees or wood to be able to get at insects. Now, mind you, according to scientists, ants and termites were not around at this time, so it's most likely they're going after beetle grubs. And while we do not know while we don't have a skull of Drepanosaurus, looking at their close related relatives, they have a skull that are very similar to birds. Pretty interesting enough, not too much like reptiles. Now, the crest is basically that's just something that's speculative, and we currently do not know if they have a long tongue to be able to get insects. We haven't discovered the hyoid of the Drepanosaurus, and what we do found is maybe they didn't exactly have a long tongue like anteaters, but who knows? More discoveries could be made. And Drepanosaurus also has this large hump on its back, which is basically most comprised of their shoulder blades. And I would definitely say this, for me, it's a lot of muscle in here, allowing it to be able to use its claws to scratch out any insects beneath the bark. So this is definitely be a very interesting reptile, and even though we do find a way to resurrect this reptile, we will definitely need to figure out on how to make an enclosure that is suitable for Drepanosaurus. Thankfully, even though this reptile is bizarre, there are a lot of reptiles that live similar lives or live in similar habitats that we can get a good idea. Now, let's get to the enclosure requirements for Drepanosaurus. One of the first things we would need to do for the enclosure is size dimensions, and I think this actually would be one of the easier parts of it. Due to their similar sizes and similar arboreal lifestyles, we will use the Solomon Island or prehensile-tailed skinks for reference for enclosure sizes and other attributes of the enclosure. With this, I would recommend that the height of the cage should be between 4 feet and 6 feet tall, and the width to be between 2 feet and 3 feet wide. And the length of the enclosure would be at a minimum of 5 to 6 feet long. And these are just at minimum for one individual animal. The sizes could be greater than this for multiple animals or just for the individual animal. The immense height of the enclosure requirements for such a small reptile is primarily to compensate for the arboreal lifestyle of the Drepanosaurus. And just like with any arboreal animal, climbing structures will need to be added on so the animal could be able to exhibit its climbing behavior. And here are some 4 things that could be used. One obvious climbing structure would be to install tree branches. Just make sure that the tree branches are thick enough that they could be able to withstand the animal's weight, but also, while this could be a trial and error situation, make certain that the tree branches do not come from toxic plants. Like I said, this could be a trial and error, but avoid the ones that are known to be toxic. Also used for arboreal animals would be climbing rope, manila heavy-duty climbing rope to be precise. This has often been used very well for arboreal animals, and could definitely work for Drepanosaurus as well. Another successful climbing structure for arboreal animals would be chains that are within a fire hose. The chains will definitely make it very firm, but a fire hose would need to be on it, not only that it would be softer, but also that the links of the chain won't accidentally pinch or pull on any of the Drepanosaurus' skin or scales. Another climbing structure that is successful with arboreal animals are climbing cargo nets. These can serve as not just as like stairs or ladders more accurately, but also can be done to make as hammocks for the animals. Well, just make certain that these nets are not treated with chemicals that are harmful to animals, especially to reptiles.
According to scientists, the world of the Drepanosaurus is said to be much warmer than today, between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius, or between 68 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit on average, with some areas possibly dealing with higher temperatures. With this in mind, I would have to say that using the temperature requirements of tropical reptiles would be best. For example, Solomon Island or prehensile-tailed skink's habitat temperature should be between 85 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the day and between 70 and 75 degrees at night. Another example would be that the northern caiman lizard of South America needs a habitat temperature of around 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius, and a cooler side around 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius. One other example would be that the Chinese crocodile lizard prefers cooler temperatures with a gradient from 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 and 27 degrees Celsius during the day, and a drop to between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 22 degrees Celsius at night. Like all reptiles, UVB or ultraviolet B lights are essential for the Drepanosaurus's health. It should cover about 2/3 of the enclosure and be replaced every 6 months. UVB lights would also help the reptile synthesize vitamin D3 and metabolize calcium. While we do not know if the Drepanosaurus is nocturnal or diurnal, having light and darkness cycles would be important, since, according to paleontologists, Drepanosaurus was in the northern part of Pangaea and was close, but not too close to the equator. So I would say that a photoperiod or light period similar to that of the northern hemisphere would be ideal, and you can add a small amount of visible light to mimic moonlight at night. According to scientists, the Triassic environment experienced seasonal subhumid conditions with semi-arid intervals, basically the monsoon seasons mentioned earlier. To replicate this, it would be advisable to have the majority of the enclosure to experience this as well, half of the year with low humidity, with the other half having relatively higher humidity. For those who don't know, a subhumid humidity percentage would generally be considered to be below 50% relative humidity. This means the air contains a relatively low amount of moisture, falling within a range that is considered dry or moderately dry, as opposed to humid, which typically refers to higher humidity levels above 50%. So, with this in mind, it would be advisable that humidity levels of the Drepanosaurus habitat should be below 50%.
It's also an added note that reptiles that live in monsoon-dominated environments, it's been observed that when the humidity rises, or basically when the monsoon rains come, that's generally when the reptiles in those environments will start their breeding season. So this would definitely be a good note to know when you want to breed these animals in captivity.
But even if we were to follow this seasonal humidity change, the Drepanosaurus would still need to have access to a considerate amount of moisture so that it won't have dry skin and would be able to shed their skin off effectively. Failure to do so would cause the reptile to not be able to shed their skin properly, and this would lead to cracked skin, skin infections, and even amputations of toes and limbs. To give the Drepanosaurus that option, even during its dry season, a box with a humidifier attached to it and moss placed within it must be provided. This moss box would act like the Drepanosaurus's own sauna that it could come in and out of as it pleases or feels dry. Having the humidifier making the moss box give off about 50% humidity would be desirable, and make certain that it is cleaned when needed for fecal material and even mold.
Like any animal in captivity, the Drepanosaurus should have access to fresh, clean water for hydration. As well as for drinking, this reptile would most likely bathe or soak within the water for both skin hydration or just simply to cool off its body temperature. It would be advisable to have a tub that is full of water so that the Drepanosaurus could drink and soak itself in the water. But don't fill the tub up to the point that the reptile could accidentally drown itself in the water. I would say, to be safe, to have the water filled up to 5 to 6 centimeters or 2 to closer to 2.5 inches water deep. That way it's enough that it can be able to go and soak it, but if its head is resting, it won't accidentally drown itself. Now, not only do we need the enclosure to be good for the animal, we also need for it to look good, and sometimes even looking good will go well for the animal. To make it naturalistic for the animal, and to be able to make it look good for the public, we will need to be able to decorate the enclosure. Now, as we would decorate the enclosure, there are many ways we can do it. One is that we can include like stones, so that not only they look good, but they also would be good basking areas for the reptile. Because a stone in the light would make it warm, and that's a good place for a reptile to warm itself up. And for a substance on the ground, we can. This will be a trial and error, but I would say probably sand. Sand, it's a very classic thing to use, and it could also be good for a reptile to dig in to lay eggs whenever they feel like it. And they use gravel, which is often said to be a good one as well. But the next thing that people like to use for decorating the reptile's home is with plants. Now, since we know that the Drepanosaurus is an insectivorous reptile, more eggs is the best guess. But anyway, it would say it would be safe to be able to use plastic plants. Now I say safe because if we got like herbivorous reptiles, like a tortoise, for example, they would accidentally eat the plastic plants, thinking they are real plants, and of course that will lead to medical issues. And of course, plastic plants would be, you don't have to water them or anything like that. But if you do want to use real plants, well, at least one, the Drepanosaurus won't eat them out of existence. But you would have to make certain, like I mentioned earlier in the video, have to make certain that they are not toxic or will cause an allergic reaction to the Drepanosaurus. Now, mind you, this would be trial and error. Some of that we do know about what plants are poisonous to reptiles could definitely help. But for the Drepanosaurus in particular, that's going to be a trial and error. And whenever one guess is faulty, make sure you are ready to take care of the Drepanosaurus on that moment. When dealing with any new species, there's always going to be a trial and error, so this will definitely be expected. Tree branches would also make a great decoration for the enclosure, and as mentioned earlier in the video, they would be great climbing structures for the Drepanosaurus. Also, these tree branches would also be useful for another thing, enrichment. Not just enrichment for the arboreal lifestyle, but also enrichment for finding insects. The big claws on its forelimbs, which are also its namesake, are theorized by scientists that it would use them to claw for insects underneath the bark of branches or tree trunks. One good enrichment idea to do this is to basically have insects like mealworms in the crevice and holes drilled in the tree branches, and have the Drepanosaurus use their claws to dig out these insects to get at them. Another good enrichment idea to use this natural behavior is to have insects placed inside cardboard tubes, whether it's like paper towels or otherwise. Have insects inside, drill a hole in it so that the Drepanosaurus can be able to smell the said insects, and then they would use their claws to rip it apart to get at the insects. Like a lot of animals, the Drepanosaurus would definitely like areas or little places where they can hide from prying eyes. So it would definitely be a good idea to have multiple hide boxes so that the Drepanosaurus doesn't feel overwhelmed and can be able to hide whatever it needs to. Whenever you get a new animal of any variety, you always got to make certain to build a good home that will suit all of its needs. And the Drepanosaurus, no matter how bizarre it is no different. If you made it this far, thank you ever so kindly for watching this video. This subject was very fascinating, Both it was a pretty small, easy scale, and it was with one of the most interesting and weirdest animals of the Late Triassic. So it was definitely a treat to work on. I want to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, Gabbr. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He came to me with this video idea, and he actually was able to help with the sponsorship by providing illustrations. In fact, most of the illustrations of Drepanosaurus here were his own. And also I want to say thanks to Keenan Taylor for, surprisingly, the only one illustration that it was in the whole video. Many of you know I use him for commissions a lot, but it was a good illustration they gave me permission to use. I also want to thank Artbyjrc, hope I pronounced that correctly, for permission to use one of his illustrations as well. If you want to be able to check them out, I'll let links to their pages down below. I don't know Alexander's page, but whenever he does, I'll bring it up as well. And also want to say thanks to my Patreon subscribers and viewers like you. Thank you. You guys were able to encourage me to continue with this project. And if you haven't already, either become a patron on my Patreon page, I'll link down below, subscribe to this channel. Every little bit helps. Next month in February, we will be going on the idea of rewilding the thylacoleo or pouched lion back to the wilds of Australia. I hope that each and every one of you has a grand day, especially with this new year. Adios!